Okay, today we're doing our word problems, and so I've given you, you can print these off as blank notes, but I've given you your steps here at the top. Most of the time when my students see word problems, they just leave them blank, but they're really not that bad, and I picked ones that weren't too terrible. So the first thing I always do is define what the question asks. So in this first one, it asks, what is that number? So I say X is that number. Now once I know what X is, then I can work from there. So it says 6 times a number, so that would be 6X, is increased, that's plus, by 4. The result is 16. Okay, so that's my equation there. All I have to do after that point is just solve it out. Okay, so to solve this equation out, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So 6x would equal 12. I'll divide both sides by 6, and x would equal 2. And that's how that one works. The second one says when a number is decreased by 30% of itself, the result is 28. What is that number? X. X is the number. Now before we get started, I need to make sure you understand how to write 30% as a decimal. So 30%, you drop your percent sign, and right now your decimal is understood to be right here behind the 0. You're going to move it 2 places over, so it would be 0.30. You could also say 0.3, that would be fine. Okay, so let's begin this one again. It says when a number, X, is decreased minus by 30%, that would be 0.30 of itself. So itself would just be X. The result is 28. Now let me stop there for just a second. Percent means part of a whole. So in any of these problems that I'm about to do, when you have percent, it's got to have the whole with it. In this case, an X. So anytime I say 20, since it says 30% of itself, you have to put the X in that position because it's not just decreased by 30 cents or 30 hundredths, it's decreased by 30% of itself. So that's why that's in there. Now the next thing you have to do is simplify these x's. You have to put them together. Remember there's an understood 1 in front of this x here. So when you put them together, you're going to say 1 minus 0.30. Well, 1 minus 0.30 would be 0.70x. Now here's where I usually lose people. So let me go back over this step one more time. These are both x terms. I've highlighted them in green. These are both x terms. You have to put them together. So you can take your calculator and literally press 1 minus 0.30 and you'll get the 0.70. But another thing that you can think about if you're having trouble with the decimals is pretend that it's money for just a second. If you had $1 and I took away 30 cents, what would be left over would be 70 cents. And so that's how I got the 0.70. Now going back to the problem, we would need to work it, of course. So I have 0.70 times x. The opposite of times is to divide, so I'm going to divide both of these by 0.70. Use your calculator. You get to use a calculator as long as it's on our approved list. And x would equal, get my calculator out, 40. So your answer for this one is 40. Okay, moving on along. Number 3 is exactly like that last one that we did. After a 40% reduction, you purchase a pair of shoes on sale for $45. What was the original price? Okay. When you're buying something on sale, you have an original price and then you discount it, and that's your sales price. And it's going to set up exactly like the problem we just finished. Now, just like in the other ones, I'm going to define x. See where it says what was the original price? That's going to be X. Okay, so it says what's the original price? X. Okay, so then it says the discount. Well, the discount here is 40%. Okay, so 40% would be 0.4 or 0.40. Now remember I told you earlier, anytime you have a percent, it's part of a whole. So you have to put the whole in there. So it's always going to have an X or an X group with it. And your sales price for this one was 45. Remember, in front of this X, it helps a little bit if you remember that in front of this X you have a 1. So if you put these two X terms together, 1 whole minus 0.40, 1 minus 0.40 would be 0.60x. 0.60x equals 45. We could divide both sides by 0.60, and we're going to get that X equals 75. And that's what we would get with that one. Okay, I'm having a little computer difficulty, so I'm going to stop the video here. When you are ready to look at for example 4, you'll find that on the second video.